You make it easy to love you. You are good and you are kind. You bring joy into my life. You make it easy to trust you. You never left my side. You've been faithful every time. All I want is you. Jesus, all I want is you. You are the refuge I run to. You are the fire that leads me through the night. I'll follow you anywhere. There's a million reasons to trust you. Nothing to fear, for you're by my side. I'll follow you anywhere. Jesus, you came to my rescue. Yes, you did. You took my place upon the cross. You redeemed what I had lost. Now my whole world's revolving around you. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Oh, you're the center of my life. You're the treasure. You're the prize. Oh, and all I want is you, Jesus. You are the refuge I run to, and you are the fire that leads me through the night, 'cause I'll follow you anywhere. Oh, there's a million reasons to trust you. Oh, nothing to fear, for you're by my side. I'll follow you anywhere. I'll follow you anywhere. Oh, follow you anywhere. Oh, wherever you lead me, whatever it costs me, all I want is you. All I want is you. Oh, wherever you lead me, whatever it costs me, all I want is you. Oh, all I want is you. Oh, wherever you lead me, whatever it costs me, all I want is you. All I want is you. All I want is you. All I want is you.
This song has become a popular refrain, a rallying cry, really, for Christians and for churches. It's so simple to say and so easy to sing. And it's really a prayer. I mean, it's directed at God. I'll follow you anywhere. Wherever you lead me, whatever it costs me, all I want is you. Since its 2019 release, the song has become an anthem of unity, really, among many churches. I mean, today, right now, hundreds of thousands of people will worshipfully serenade Jesus Christ with passion and closed eyes and lifted hands. Wherever you lead me, whatever it costs me, all I want is you. But can we pause for a moment and think, really think about what we're telling God? Not to remove the song, but to more fully engage our soul in it. Christian Stanfill, who is one of the writers of that song, he said this about the lyrics. He said, it's a costly thing to say, and I can feel myself shrink back from that commitment. I like my life and my comforts and the stuff I have. Am I okay saying yes to whatever Jesus asks me to do? The answer, he said, has to be yes. James would agree. The answer has to be yes. James is, in my view, the most practical, boots-on-the-ground book in the whole Bible. 5 chapters filled with easy-to-apply truth for how to live a life that honors God, that does what's right, that finishes well. And James, for the record, I'm convinced he would love this song, but only if we actually practice the melody that we chant. And I'm going to tell you why I would say that, and I'm going to give you some practical ways maybe to live that out in a few minutes, but I want to back up first. Do you know what an oxymoron is? An oxymoron is a word that describes a phrase that contradicts itself. Like the truths in the phrase oppose each other so that the words don't go together. Like, have you ever heard someone say, that guy's pretty ugly? I mean, that's an oxymoron. I mean, pretty and ugly don't go together. They don't go next to each other. It's one or the other. You can't have both. Now, look, we're headed somewhere spiritual and practical for your life, I promise. But let's have a little bit fun with this first. I mean, let's talk about oxymorons. How about genuine imitation? By definition, an imitation is not genuine. Or why do we call it the Civil War? For that matter, is there such a thing as civil politics? Or here's one some of us have experienced: hospital food. I would argue that's an oxymoron. And every time I pass by this place, speaking of food, I always chuckle a little bit when I see the name of this restaurant, Panda Express. That one takes a minute. Here's one that might make you mad. Here's an oxymoron: Ford Tough. Yeah, send me the email. I'll can't wait for it. Here's one we all feel right now: cheap gas. Have you ever heard someone say, I'd like to offer you my unbiased opinion? Or refer to an agency as a government organization? Just one more. I was in a meeting this week, and someone reminded me of an event that I knew about but have never participated in. It's in Raleigh, North Carolina. It's called the Krispy Kreme Run. Now, James would add to our fun list with an oxymoron that's not so fun, and he would insist that we need to reconsider it. And I'm going to show you what it is after we read his words. He says this: what good is it, my brothers and sisters, if someone claims to have faith but has no deeds? Can such a faith save them? Suppose a brother or sister is without clothes and daily food. If one of you says to them, go in peace, keep warm and well fed, but does nothing about their physical needs, what good is it? In the same way, faith by itself, if it is not accompanied by action, is dead. So here's James's oxymoron: faith without action. He would say, this doesn't go together. Maybe you've heard someone say, or maybe you've said this yourself, something like, I'm Catholic, but I'm not practicing. Or how about this one? I believe in God, of course, but I don't live like I should. Or maybe I believe in God, but I'm really private about it. James would challenge all of those statements and the sentiment behind them. And let me just take a time out for a second. I'm not trying to beat anybody up. So if you're offended at those examples I just gave you, come back. Really, we're all in this together. No one can claim that we get this right all the time. Stay with me. James would say that there's no such thing as faith without action. He would call that an oxymoron. By definition, faith is active. Or to say it in the negative, faith without action is no faith at all. Why? Because if you really believed, you could not sit still. You couldn't stay where you are. You couldn't be silent. You couldn't just watch. You couldn't relegate your faith to a few songs and a sermon on Sundays. You couldn't live life like you've always lived it. Real faith in Jesus, James says, necessarily moves you to action on behalf of Jesus, because when you follow Jesus, you want to live like Jesus. And Jesus never, ever just watched. He never just believed. He never just privately devoted himself to God. Jesus moved, and he helped, and he challenged, and he put himself in harm's way, and he sacrificed. Faith without action is no faith at all. But James's teachings, they seem to have some competition from within the Bible itself. And I want to make sure that we clear the fog on that today. For those of you who've been students of the Bible, and for those of you who might have been in church for a long time, this text from James presents a real problem, because the church, from its earliest beginnings, spent most of its energy focusing on the writings of the Apostle Paul. And Paul seemed to equally be passionate about faith alone, without any accompaniment, without any works at all. And he would say that that's all that matters. Like Ephesians 2, where Paul says, "For it is by grace that you've been saved through faith. This is not of yourselves. It is a gift of God." Here it is, not by works, so that no one can boast. And then in Romans 10:9, Paul reiterated that by saying, if you declare with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. Declare with your mouth, believe in your heart, saved by faith, not by works. No action necessary. And Paul clearly states, he explicitly states, that we are saved through faith alone, and not by any action or deed or thing that we do. And the early church actually wrestled with what appears to be competing ideas. I'll clear it up in a minute. So when Martin Luther and his friends began the Protestant Reformation a few hundred years ago and broke away from the Catholic Church, Martin Luther was so angry that James had confused people that he actually wanted to throw James out of the Bible. He called it the Epistle of Straw. Epistle means letter. The Epistle of Straw. And what he meant by that was that he thought James had no substance. It really couldn't stand up on its own, because he saw James as more focused on works than on faith. So the question we've got to answer is, are James and Paul disagreeing with each other? And the answer is not really. See, the difference between Paul and James is not their teaching. It is their starting place. They begin at two different times in a person's spiritual journey. Paul begins at the beginning. No one can earn forgiveness from God. No one can deserve or purchase your own way to heaven. Sin created a chasm between people and God, and it's too wide for any amount of good works to cross. I don't care how good you are for the rest of your life. You'll never be good enough. So God sent Jesus Christ to bridge the gap for us. Through faith in Jesus and acceptance of the free gift of forgiveness that he offers, only then can we finally connect with God. Not because of anything we've done, but because of what Jesus already did. That's where Paul begins, with the person who needs to know that they can just stop trying to earn favor with God, but that they can get to him through faith alone in Jesus. No works required. You want to be saved? Paul tells you how. Declare with your mouth Jesus is Lord. Believe in your heart God raised him from the dead, and you will be saved. As a matter of fact, when we do baptisms, we ask the person who's about to be baptized, we say, "What's your testimony?" And you know what they say back? Jesus is Lord, because of that text. But James isn't starting with salvation. He's starting somewhere else. He's talking to a person who's already a follower of Jesus. The person who's already crossed the line of faith, who claims to be forgiven. They have accepted the gift of forgiveness. They're already in a relationship with God. To that person, James says, you are not saved by works, but you are saved for them. God sent Jesus to save you through faith and then to utilize you to be his agent through what you do. But someone will say, James says, but someone will say, well, you have faith and I have deeds. And James says, show me your faith without deeds and I'll show you my faith by my deeds. You believe that there is one God, good. Even the devil, even the demons believe that and shudder. For some people, faith is an intellectual trip. Faith, for some people, is a matter to be studied and debated and talked over and discussed. And so James imagines this intellectual objector. He's envisioning somebody who says, hey, you're into faith and I'm into works. That's cool. I mean, different strokes, different folks and all that. You got your thing, I got mine, to each his own. One person says, hey, stimulate me mentally, but don't ask me to make any commitment. And the other person says, well, show me your faith without deeds, and I'll show you by faith by what I do. And both are equally valid, right? Not so fast, James says. Real faith is visible. Real faith is apparent. If you claim to follow Jesus, people will be able to see it. It'll be obvious. Like someone once said, faith is like calories. You can't see them, but you sure can see the results. You can't see faith, but you can see the results of it. James would totally agree. And let's stick with talking about faith. I don't really like talking about calories anyway. James is saying, you say that you follow Jesus. Or we could use a more traditional label. You identify yourself as a Christian. Well, James would say, prove it. Let me see your actions back up your words. Put your actions where your mouth is. If I were to say to you, I believe my physical health is very important. My physical health is a high priority in my life, and I believe that health is one of the most important things we ought to have, and we ought to take it seriously. If I were to say that to you, and let's say you asked me some questions in return, you might ask, well, do you eat right? Nah. Do you ever, break a sweat and exercise? Nah. Do you get proper rest? Do you take some vitamins? You ever go to the doctor for a checkup? If I answer no to all the questions, then it really doesn't matter what I say. What counts are my actions. You ever heard of Charles Blondin? He was, in a day gone by, one of the greatest tightrope walkers in all of history. And there are lots of legends about all the things he did. And one of the most often told stories of Blondin is of his crossing Niagara Falls on a tightrope. He did it many times. And one of those times, he was walking across the Niagara Falls on a tightrope, and he turned to this large audience that was behind him. It included all kinds of people and lots of reporters from lots of newspapers all over the place. And he asked them, they were all cheering for him, and he asked them, how many of you believe I could walk across this tightrope, across Niagara Falls, pushing a wheelbarrow? And everybody, cheered. Yeah, we believe you can do it. And then he said, well, how many of you believe I could walk across Niagara Falls pushing a wheelbarrow over the tightrope with a man in the wheelbarrow? And there was also, a loud response. People cheered and clapped and pumped their fists in the air. And they had all seen him do amazing things. Yes, they said, we absolutely believe that you could walk across Niagara Falls on a tightrope, pushing a wheelbarrow with a man sitting in it. And right in the middle of all that passionate screaming and affirmation, Blondin pointed to one of the most enthusiastic guys in the audience, and he said, you believe? And the guy said, absolutely. Okay, he said, get in the wheelbarrow. That's when the cheering stopped. And the man who seconds earlier said he believed, he made a quick exit. And Blondin demonstrated that there is often a great difference between the faith we say we have and the faith we really have. The measure of our faith, James would say, is not in our talk. It's in our walk. It's in what we do and what we're prepared to do. James completes his thought like this. He says, you foolish person. Do you want evidence that faith without deeds is useless? Was not our father Abraham considered righteous, and he was called God's friend? You see that a person is considered righteous by what they do and not by faith alone. In the same way, was not even Rahab the prostitute considered righteous for what she did when she gave lodging to the spies and sent them off in a different direction? As the body without the spirit is dead, so faith without deeds is dead. James doesn't really mince words here. Seems very clear and a little personally convicting. James says that faith with no action is no faith at all. Because you don't really believe what you're saying, because if you did believe what you were saying, you wouldn't be able to remain still and do nothing about it. You'd have to do something. You can't just sit there. So what does it mean for you and me? It means that our faith, if it's genuine, moves us to action. Did you know the word believe in the Greek, which is the language that James writes in, the word believe in Greek means to trust in, to cling to rely on, to commit yourself completely. In the Bible, belief is never simply an academic exercise or an intangible spiritual thought. You know, when James uses Abraham as an example of faith in action, he's referring to Genesis chapter 22, when God tells Abraham to sacrifice his own son, his only son, Isaac. Now, for the record, God never really intended for Isaac to die, but simply to see if Abraham would actually follow me anywhere, as the song goes. Abraham's willingness to live into the truth of wherever you lead me, whatever it costs me, that's faith in action, which James would say is the only real faith. James also refers to Rahab, who helped the people of God at great risk to herself and to her family because she believed that God was moving, and she sprung to action in a wherever you lead me, whatever it costs me kind of way. When you and I choose our personal preference or our comfort over the voice of God, we are creating a contradiction, an oxymoron in our soul. And it generates a conflict within us. So followers of Jesus, we must always, always, always follow Jesus with our actions. And look, this is easy when God calls us to do something that we like, something that's comfortable, or something with a small cost. That's not hard. But real faith comes at the intersection of sacrifice and personal preference. For example, in 2019, the summer of that year, I was scheduled to go to Tanzania with a team of people from our church, some of whom I had personally invited and encouraged to go with us. Our church helped some people in that country, and we've got important partnerships there, and I knew that it was time for me to go. I knew that God wanted me to go. And then, in the spring of that year, my daughter told me that our first grandchild would likely be born while I was 8,000 miles away on the east coast of Africa. And that's when the cost got real. Especially when my daughter personally asked me to be at the hospital when Kinsley came into the world. She and I had been through a couple of years of really hard times in our relationship, and we were healing, and our family was becoming whole again. And her request of me, her desire to have me there, it was more powerful than I can describe with words. I was in Kiela, in a small village in the middle of nowhere, Tanzania, and I shouldn't have had a cell signal, but I got her text. Dad, she's here. Miraculously, I found the smallest shred of Wi-Fi, and I was able to briefly FaceTime with my wife, Susan, and our daughter, Mary Ashley, and there, in her tiny newborn wonder, was Kinsley. And all of my being, everything I had wanted to charter a plane right then and there and come home that very instant. But wherever he leads me, whatever it costs me, is not a lyric in a song to me. It's a resound from James's words. A person is considered righteous by what they do, not by faith alone. As the body without the spirit is dead, so faith without action is dead. We were there to help people. God called me to go there and help people. And somebody right now is thinking, well, what about your family? Shouldn't you put faith into action with them? Which is a polite way of saying, you made the wrong choice, Brian. I mean, family first. All due respect, that's exactly what we're talking about today. Because for me, Jesus is first. Always. No matter what. Nothing supersedes his voice or his calling. Faith requires action wherever he leads me, whatever it costs me. There were 3 days left in that trip. Honestly, it's the hardest thing I've ever done in my life to focus on where I was for those 72 hours. And even when our plane landed in D.C., I was supposed to ride with our group all the way back home. But when I got out of the gate, Susan was standing there. She had surprised me. She'd driven all the way to get me so that we could break every speed limit and get home in record time. Meeting Kinsley for the first time is a profound memory I will never forget. But doing what God wanted me to do, that's the proof in the pudding for me. And yes, I'd do it the same exact way if I could go back and do it all over again. Because faith without action is dead. It's worthless. The question then, for those of us who claim to believe in Jesus, is where's the evidence? Where is the fruit? Where's the action? James would say that your lifestyle, your choices, your actions, your works, your words, your sacrifices, all of it should point to one thing, your claim of faith in Jesus. James would say that your faith should be evident by the contribution you make to the world, to the people in the world, to the people around you, not just your family. So what are some of the ways that you can and should demonstrate that your faith is alive and real, that you're putting actions to your words? Well, I unpack a little bit of that in the follow-up video that I did for you today, which you can find on our website. But real faith is not just something you say. It becomes something you do. Maybe you're here today and you've wondered why you feel distant from God, why your faith has no spark in it. Maybe, just maybe, it's because you've resisted the tug of God to do something. So if your faith has become actionless or passionless or dead, James would say this, you are the only one who can do something about that. And you can do something about it today. Make a commitment, like a real one. Find out where sacrifice is required. Pay the price. Look for people that are not just in your family, people you don't know, and help them. Set aside some time and some energy and help this movement, because we help people around here. Because real faith requires action. Sacrifice is necessary, but it is worth it. And in the end, I get a double win. Not only can I know that I'm living my faith in a complete and holistic way, which draws me close to God, but I'm actually making the world a better place too. Don't stay where you are. Come on the journey with us, where faith is not a word, it's a movement. So let's mean it. Let's mean these words not just as words, but as inspiration for our souls to actually move, because our faith is not a concept. It's a world-changing, life-altering reality.
Wherever you lead me, whatever it costs me, all I want is you, Jesus. All I want is you. Wherever you lead me, whatever it costs me, all I want is you, Jesus. All I
That is our commitment today. Those of us who have made Jesus Lord of our lives, who believe in him, will follow him anywhere. We can't stand still. We have to do something. So let's take advantage of summer's looser schedule to put our faith into action with the Summer Do Good Challenge. We challenge you, whether by yourself or with your family or small group, to do good in your local community this summer. There's a list of ideas on the website. Do one of those or whatever else God leads you to do. And we would love to hear about how God works through you this summer. So let us know how it goes. So have a great holiday weekend, and we'll see you back next week for more practical teaching from James.